Hey everyone, my name is Timothy Smith and welcome to our training today. This is a continuation of our introduction to stress and trauma. Today we are going to focus on understanding the autonomic nervous system, how that internal clacker helps regulate your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. When you're working with children who have had a massive amount of stress or have had trauma in their life, it's important for the adult to understand that that regulation looks and feels a little bit different. How the child manages their window of tolerance, what they can and cannot tolerate, when they get jacked up and get overstimulated versus the times that they just completely shut down, and what is needed from the adult during that time frame. While we are mainly talking about the autonomic nervous system for the children, this applies to you as well, the adult. And you have to be able to recognize your own window of tolerance. You have to be able to be consciously aware of your internal clacker, when it's regulated, when it's jacked up, or when it shuts down. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Before we move forward, I just want to do a little recap from our first training on introduction to stress and trauma. Hopefully all of you have had a chance to participate in that training. You've had a chance to review that recorded video. If you haven't done that, you're going to be okay, participating in today's training event. But I do encourage you, go back and watch that initial training that we did on understanding stress and trauma. I do just want to do a little quick overview, a little recap of that first training, so that once again, when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, you've got a good, clear understanding of what we're referring to right here. So when we're referring to trauma, and trauma can also be a massive amount of stress that a person is either under, or a massive amount of stress that someone has been through, right? We always want to address the adult first and the child second. You must have a regulated adult, okay, before the adult can co-regulate a stressed or child who have experienced trauma. If you have an adult that is not composed, an adult that is also, has a very narrow window of tolerance, and you're expecting that adult to work with this child, it's just going to create a disaster. It could potentially create more stress. It definitely could create more trauma. So first thing is that you always have to address the adult first. Are you composed? Okay. Do you have good judgment? Do you have self-control? Are you in the proper state before you assist that child? All right. Now, the great thing about this is what you offer to others, you strengthen within yourself. All right. So even when you do have an adult that has a massive amount of stress, or you have an adult that has unresolved trauma, as long as they are in the appropriate state at the appropriate time, the work that we do with young children to help them through trauma and stress is actually benefiting the adult as well. All right. And the pathway back from trauma is play. All right. Now, when I say the pathway back from trauma is play, that includes the adult and their pathway back from trauma. Lots of open-ended play. All right. But again, we got to be aware of that internal clacker, right? Before we can have adequate open-ended play. The type of trauma that we want to be aware of when we're working with individuals, lots of different events could happen in a person's life that could create trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, assault, right? And a lot of times when we think about trauma, these are the four things that we immediately associate with, but it's so much more than that. Neglect, an individual not getting their personal needs met, all right? A child not getting their personal needs met. This happens over a period of time. This could create trauma. A serious accident, such as a car accident or a traumatic significant event, illness or medical procedure, a child that has been diagnosed with a significant illness and is hospitalized or has to go through massive amounts of surgeries. This could create trauma. And the thing about the serious accident, illness, or medical procedures is you may not see the trauma right away. And while the child is progressing through this incident or these procedures, they may appear to be okay. It's not until after the recovery that the trauma starts showing its face, right? So, so many times when we're working with families, they're like, oh, well, while the child was sick, while the child was in the hospital, they were so resilient. They kept such a positive attitude. All right, the trauma could not be caused from this. Well, it could, all right, because a lot of this, it doesn't bubble up to the surface until there's a felt sense of safety. A witness to domestic violence, a witness to community violence, school violence, the fear of school violence. We're seeing a lot of this right now where a child doesn't necessarily experience the school violence, but there's so much fear, there's so much anxiety, is my school going to be next, right? That could create trauma right there. Natural disasters such as tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, forced displacement, war, terrorism, political violence, traumatic grief or separation, losing a loved one, losing someone that is very important to you, especially when the loss happens suddenly, right? And then, that system-induced trauma, the removal from home, foster care situation, separation from siblings, right? All of this are different types of trauma that we commonly see in early education classrooms. Now, when we are working with adults that have unresolved trauma, or when I say unresolved trauma, it could also be just trauma that hasn't come to the surface yet. There's a lot of people with indicators of trauma, and they don't even realize that they have unresolved trauma yet. So massive amounts of anxiety, excessive blame and attack, eating disorders, drinking disorders, intimate belief that you're just a bad person. How many of y'all have met someone or even a child that, they just believe they're a bad person for no particular reason? That's just what they believe in themselves. That is a big indicator of trauma right there. When we talk about generational trauma, we see that innate belief of badness and generational trauma quite often. That very concrete black and white thinking, like it's either this or it's that. It's either us or it's them, right? You're either right or you're wrong. The inability to compromise, okay? That inability to retain relationships. How many of y'all know people that, every relationship they get into, they sabotage, the relationship right there. Just they kind of force themselves to lose the relationship. When we talk about attachment styles and, sometimes children that don't have healthy attachment, they have avoidant attachment, and that turns into a mental model of relationships. Children that have avoidant attachment styles, they grow up to be adults that have the inability to retain relationships and basically, sabotage any relationship that they're in. Looking at children, right? So that was the adults that we were just talking about. So, that could be adults that are working in the classroom. It could be parents. It could be guardians, other responsible individuals for that child. And we want to be able to support those individuals, encourage those individuals, and be there for them. Now, when we're looking at children, right, indicators for children: anger, rage, excessive temper. Now, don't get everyday behavior and everyday aggression confused with anger and rage. Anger and rage fall into completely different buckets than everyday behavior and aggression. All right? There is a big difference between those. That's a whole nother training in itself right there. A child with nightmares, sleeping problems. Remember, children under the age of 7, they don't have mature inner speech. All they have are images, right? So very common for those nightmares and those sleeping problems to surface for these children because those images, start appearing. Eating problems, whether they're very picky eaters or they overeat and basically make themselves sick because they eat so much. Children that are overly bossy or controlling, right? That's a defense mechanism right there. I have to be in charge or else I'm going to lose the battle. It's like the eat or be eaten mentality. That's where that's coming from right there. Children that have a difficult time focusing, a difficult time learning. That is the executive skill of flexibility that we see in our executive functions, your prefrontal lobes, the higher centers of your brain. Separation anxiety. So again, when we talk about attachment styles, you really want to focus on how does a child reunite? How does a child separate from the important adults in their life? That could be teacher, that could be parent, that could be guardian. So when you do have that separation anxiety, that's a pretty big indicator that there is possible trauma or stress in that child's life. So we need to be able to see the world from the child's point of view in those cases. Child that's real clingy. We see that a lot with anxious attachment situations. They're very, very clingy to their adult. Unreasonable, or they create a lot of new fears. A heightened, startled response when something happens. Anxiety about themselves, anxiety about other people. And a lot of that is nonverbal, right? They don't actually tell you, or they may not have the words or the wisdom to, kind of tell you that they've got this anxiety. But you see it in nonverbal actions, all right? Increased distress, so whining, irritable, moody, all right? And just kind of focus on that word, increased distress. You're going to have children that are whiny and irritable and moody every single day, all right? That's just part of being a child. But it's the increased distress, all right, where this is kind of at the extreme right here. And then, of course, the regression, the child that is going backwards, all right? So these are all possible indicators of stress and trauma that you want to look for in your classroom. All right, so now let's talk about, the purpose of this video right here, and it's understanding the autonomic nervous system. All right? The autonomic nervous system is a system in our body that is something that we have in common with all mammals, all right? Every mammal out there has an ANS, all right? The autonomic nervous system. you got to think about it like this. Our brain is like a radar. And when we go out into the world, our brain is constantly searching for danger. It's constantly searching for danger. Now, hear that. The brain is constantly searching for danger. It is not constantly searching for safety. All right? It's out there searching for danger. Now, in a normal situation, especially when you've got a child or an adult that has a felt sense of safety, that has secure attachment figures in their life, right? Their brain is just kind of like deep, no safe, no danger here, no danger here. We're in low radar mode, right? And, that's typically how we want it to be. Now, an individual that has had a massive amount of stress or has had trauma, that radar is like on overtime. It's like, search. There's got to be something out there, right? I'm not going to do a casual little search. I'm going to do a massive amount of search because, trust me, there's danger out there somewhere and I'm going to find it, right? It's like it's determined to find something that is not safe, right? And that's what that brain is doing right there. That's where that intense distress comes from. It's like, I've got to find something that's not safe, right? I've got to find something that's not safe to keep myself safe. Otherwise, if I let my guard down, I'm in danger, okay? Now, all this is happening in a non-cognitive, non-conscious, non-verbal state, all right? So as your brain is in overtime searching for danger, all right, you're not aware of it, you're not thinking about it, and you're not talking about it, all right? It's all non-cognitive, non-conscious, non-verbal. These are primitive skills, all right? You think about a little deer out in the Serengeti, right? It goes to get the drink of water out of the river, all right? It knows that tiger, that lion, can jump out of that bush at any moment and attack it, all right? That's just how they live their life, is in that constant, I got to make sure I know where the danger is, okay? So that's where, the autonomic nervous system, you can relate to this with other primitive mammals out there. We have this internal clacker, okay? So kind of do this with me with your hands right here. Keep a nice, steady, slow, calm beat, all right? And this is our internal clacker. And when this is happening right here, we can regulate, we can calm, we can solve problems, we can meet the needs of others, all right? Nice and steady. This is why our brain is a pattern-seeking organ. It likes patterns, it likes rhythm, it likes consistency. This right here creates a felt sense of safety. All right? Now, this is your window of tolerance. And when you've got this going on, you can tolerate a lot. Sometimes we have our sympathetic system that kicks in, and that's when the clacker speeds up, all right? And you kind of feel like all jacked up. And I want y'all to think about this as adults right here, all right? How many of y'all have been in a situation and just walking into a room, walking into a situation, dealing with a particular person or a child, you can literally feel your body kind of speed up and kind of feel jacked up. Your heart starts beating a little faster, All right, you can literally like feel the blood flowing quicker in your body. Your brain starts getting a little fuzzy and words kind of get jumbled coming out of your mouth. And you're just like, whoa, what's going on right here? All right, that is your sympathetic activation right there. Kind of gets jacked up. And I can't tolerate too much. I can't tolerate too much whenever my body is like this. It's really hard for me to have good judgment. Really hard for me to maintain self-control, right? Because this is what's happening inside of your body. But then sometimes the opposite happens, okay? You come into a situation and everything slows down. Okay, it's almost like your body is shutting down. You feel sluggish. You feel slow, right? It's like you got something to say, but the words just won't come out. You're trying to put your thoughts together, and they're just not tying together. All right? Something needs to happen right here, but I just am not quite sure what's supposed to happen. It's almost like you're in a daze. Okay? And sometimes this happens. You walk into a classroom, a child walks into the classroom, and it's almost like they're in slow motion. All right? Think about it right here too. Another way of looking at this, when we talk about your autonomic nervous system, think about driving a car. All right, you got your gas pedal, okay, and then you let off the gas and you slam on the brakes, okay. So when I start getting jacked up, everything starts speeding up. It's like pressing on that gas pedal. We got to go, 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 fast, 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 fast. Get out of here, get out of here. Or you slam on the brakes and you just completely shut down, slow down. And we see this in the classroom, right? You have kids that are coming to the classroom, they're idling just fine, and then all of a sudden they press on the gas pedal and they go, 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 go. All right? And you're like, slow down, right? You're gonna derail. You take that turn too fast, you're gonna flip, okay? Or the kids that just slam on the brakes and they retreat. They withdraw. They put their head down on the desk. They close their eyes. They just completely remove themselves from the situation. All right? This is what you want to look for. This is when you can see their window of tolerance is like this. They're either up here, they're either down here. Regulating this right here, when we're trying to regulate that internal clacker, connection and a felt sense of safety is important. And you've got to have safety and connection to regulate that clacker right here. Safety and connection. Meaningful connections. That child has to know that you are there for them. You are their safekeeper. You're not going to dismiss their feelings. You're not going to try to distract them with something else. You're going to notice them and you're going to be there for them. And that's what regulates this internal clacker. For those of you that need that visual, you look at it right here. You've got that window of tolerance, all right? Anything that happens between here and here, this is what I can tolerate. When the world is not going my way, when I get triggered, all right, we either press on that gas pedal, we go into sympathetic activation, or we slam on the brakes, right? You slam on the brakes and you go into parasympathetic activation, okay? Now our goal when working with children with stress and trauma, our goal is to be there for them, to be present, to notice them, and then we can open that window of tolerance so that it's nice and wide. They can handle the world when the world doesn't go their way. They can handle those triggers. You can be there to help them self-regulate. You can be there to help them push through those difficult feelings, those difficult emotions. All right? They've got a lot. Now, when a child with massive amount of stress and trauma, whenever they first come into your classroom, their window of tolerance is going to be very narrow. All right? Those of you that are working with school-age children, you're working in an after-school program. When they're in school, there's a lot of stress. They come into our after-school programs and they walk in the door with a very narrow window of tolerance. So once again, our job is to be there for them, to love them unconditionally, to be curious, not judgmental, and open that window of tolerance. Open that window of tolerance. I always think of my own mother, whenever I talk about this right here. I remember my mom, growing up, she would say things to me like, I can only handle this much of you today. Right? How many of you heard your parent or your guardian make some type of comment like that? I can only handle this much of you today. Well, now I know Mom was actually telling me she had a very narrow window of tolerance. What can we do to support and encourage Mom so that we can open that window? All right? That's what I wish we would have known back then that we know now. When we talk about stress and trauma, here's the dilemma right here. Trauma happens often in relationships, all right? It's when a person that is supposed to be there for the child, it's the person that's supposed to keep that child safe, ends up being the person that hurts the child, right? We see this so much, especially in disorganized attachment. You were supposed to be my person. You were supposed to keep me safe. But instead, you're the one that hurt me. So I say this is the dilemma because when you have children that have a lot of stress, you have children that have trauma, and a lot of times this is caused by the adults in their life. It's the dilemma because it's the relationships that help trauma heal. All right? But because it was the relationship that caused the stress and trauma, there is a brick wall that is built. And sometimes it can be very hard to break through that brick wall. All right? So, when you first read this, trauma happens often in relationships, but it's often solved through relationships that trauma is healed, right? Well, that sounds super easy, right? Until you put that massive brick wall in between it, all right? And then it's really hard for that child to break through and allow those relationships to be formed. And I'm telling you this because when you're working with the children in your classrooms, it's a lot of patience, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of understanding, it's a lot of noticing, it's a lot of encouraging. All right? You can't expect instant gratification. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And this is where we see so many early educators and educators struggle with stress and trauma. They want instant, immediate results. And you're not going to get instant, immediate results when dealing with stress and trauma. When you start working with these children, you got to be in it to win it because it takes time. All right? And you need to be constantly aware of that autonomic nervous system, that window of tolerance. All right? First off, is the adult jacked up? Is the adult withdrawn? All right? We see this right here, working with challenging behaviors. The sympathetic activation. All right, I won't work with this child. I won't work in this classroom. Okay, that right there is showing the sympathetic system. Then they get this, I can't work with that child. I can't work in that classroom. Parasympathetic activation. Okay, be aware of that so that we can open that window of tolerance and say, yes, I am in it to win it. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be encouraging. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be available. All right? And what I offer to others, I strengthen within myself. And the more time I commit to working with that child, the more time I'm committing to working on myself. Right? Because, looking again, I say this is a dilemma, it's also an opportunity. Okay? This is what's going to strengthen the willingness to push through these difficult times, that willingness to work with that child, that willingness to work with that family. All right? What the child needs, a lot of times children with stress and trauma, they feel very isolated. What they need is a sense of community. They need a sense of belonging. They need to know that you're there for them. You got to make them feel like they're part of something. This is where the school family comes in. They are of service to the other children. They have value to the classroom, right? They bring value to the classroom. They need to know that not only do you have their back, but the other children in the classroom, they have their back too. The way you greet that child in the morning. Yesterday could have been the most difficult day in the world with that child. But when they walk in the next day, it's a brand new day. You give them a safe greeting. You let them know that you are happy that they are there. You don't give any reminders of what happened yesterday. Yesterday was in the past. Today is a brand new day. Okay? Always focus on those safe greetings, those warm greetings, right? And y'all, it has to be genuine. You can't fake this stuff. All right? It's got to be genuine. And that child that's had a massive amount of stress or has a massive amount of stress, that child with trauma, they've got to be able to trust you. Trusting you means that you keep your word. All right? You are assertive, right? You have boundaries. You have routine. You have structure. That predictability is in place. All right? Trust has got to be established. Trust has to be established. Trust is not something that is instantly given. I am the adult, you're the child, you are required to trust me. It doesn't work that way. Trust has to be earned, it has to be established. And it goes both ways too. All right? But that's what the child needs right there. I'm kind of making full circle right here. So you talk about the adult first, child second. Before you as the adult are working with children with stress and trauma, you need to be fully aware of your triggers. All right. What is going to trigger you when working in that classroom, when working with that child? Be able to identify the behaviors, the words, the actions that you know is going to be a trigger for you. You got to focus on your breathing. You got to focus on calm. What works best for you, all right, in those situations. Recognize this within your body. You know, I encourage y'all to just get a piece of paper and just draw a little like gingerbread person on a piece of paper. And what does it feel like? What sensations do you have in your body whenever you get triggered, right? That sudden, intense, hard to shift body feeling. Your voice tone changes, your face tightens, your body, your posture. I know for me, the top of my head gets like really hot whenever I get triggered. I can literally like feel the trigger in my chest. My hands will kind of start shaking. But, recognize those internal responses to your trigger. All right. Some of you might have really shallow breathing. You might hold your breath. This is definitely me. Whenever I get triggered, I tend to want to start overthinking stuff. My brain just automatically starts creating worst case scenario out there. Our response is off. We just kind of jump to those conclusions. So, be able to recognize that. And that's why I say put it down on paper, draw it, color it. That way you can relate to it. And then as soon as you get that trigger and you have those sensations in your body, that is your call to calm, right? This is when you take your deep breath. Okay. Stop. Take a deep breath and relax. Tell yourself, I am safe. I can handle this. I can help the child with their problem. All right. And all of this is going to happen very quickly because that child is standing right in front of you, pushing your buttons. Now remember, the state of the adult dictates the state of the child. So your ability to stay composed, your ability to calm is going to be incredibly important for the success of that child. And I do believe, especially when we're working with trauma and stress, the child kind of needs to see you get triggered so that they can also watch you calm. It's like you're role modeling the trigger and you're role modeling the calmness and the composure. All right? And, a lot of the children, they need to actually witness this. All right? If you just go into a classroom, Pollyanna positive, and you're like, oh, everything is good, life is good, nothing's going to bother me today, everything's a breeze, it's kind of like a false reality right there. So, when you get triggered, model that composure to the child. All right? Great. Awesome. So I hope this information was helpful to you. We've got another piece of this coming. So there's actually 2 more pieces to Introduction to Stress and Trauma that I'm going to be going over with you over the course of the year. Again, if you were not able to watch the first video that we did on Introduction to Stress and Trauma, please make sure that you watch that. If you need to watch this one more time, this is recorded. It's definitely available for you to watch. Please do that. My website is right there on the screen, timthetrainer.com. You can reach out to me with any questions that you have about this training, or if you need more information related to the scope of the material, feel free to reach out to me. When you go to my website, timthetrainer.com, up in the upper right-hand corner, you can send me a direct message through my website. You can also call me. You can also email me, again, with any questions or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material. A lot of credit needs to be given for the material that I have gone over today. This was adapted from multiple different sources, mainly Dr. Becky Bailey with Conscious Discipline. So a lot of this data came from Conscious Discipline. Also, the Life is Good Playmaker Project, Playmaker University. I have to give credit to them. Again, some of the material came from their research, from their information. Make sure you check out consciousdiscipline.com. Make sure you check out the Life is Good Playmaker Project, Playmaker University, all of that good stuff. Also, credit to the Essentials textbook, which is used for CDA study, the Council for Professional Recognition. Some of this information also came from Essentials. So I want to make sure that I give credit where credit is due. So thank you to all those organizations and those individuals for your massive and incredible amount of work supporting children with stress and trauma. My name is Timothy Smith. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.